Welcome to a very special EPI seminar. Thank you so much for coming. Many of our EPI seminars are here because people have requested them. I'm always really interested and open to your suggestions for speakers. I had multiple people suggest this one. Many people in the past month have come up to me and said, Rachel, when are you going to organize something where we can ask Faye lots of questions? I'm like, let's do it. Many of you know Dr. Faye Norby. She is an assistant professor here in our division. I'm not going to say anything about her incredible career as an epidemiologist or researcher because she's here in wearing a different hat. She is here as a incredible athlete. So Faye has over 10 years of winter foot racing experience. She's done the Tuscobia 80, which is 160-mile Tuscobia as well as the Arrowhead 135, which is in northern Minnesota, and the 100-mile active EpiCH, is that how you pronounce it? In Canada. And somehow she not only does these, but she kind of like wins them all, which is so weird to me. You would think that doing one or two of these once or twice would be enough, but it's not. Once she competed all three of the ones that I just mentioned in one season, which is resulted in her being inducted into this honor society called the Reimthers. The Reimthers Society, which is a very small group of people who've done all three of these races in one season. The website says that they are a group of powerful frost giants. They're cunning, they have resilience, all the kinds of stuff that you would assume that frost giants have. So what Kay is here to talk about today is her most recent race, which was the Iditarod Trail Invitational 1,000-mile foot race, which is the world's longest ultramarathon or the world's longest winter ultramarathon. So she traveled on foot from Anchorage to Nome, Alaska. And she's the first woman to actually finish this race in 10 years. Is that true? Okay. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Faye. She's going to very briefly talk about a few things, and we're going to have most of the time open to your questions, which I'll moderate. Some people already sent me some questions, so if we run out of questions, don't worry, we've got a lot of work to do here. So thank you so much, Faye. And before I hand it over to you, of course, since this is an EPI seminar, thank you, President, for coming to talk about this.
All right. You good? We're good. Okay. So thank you all for coming to this. And I told Rachel that it's like humbling that I had so many people following me and so much support. And I'll never know it because I was on the trail and oblivious to anything except like staying alive and like doing one foot at a time. But thank you all for coming and Rachel for organizing this. So just a very brief history of the Iditarod sled dog race because that's the reason that the human race exists. It was created in the 1960s for two main reasons: to save the sled dog culture and Alaskan Huskies, and to preserve the historical Iditarod Trail between Seward and Nome. So the race is a reconstruction of really old trails that were established originally by Alaskan Native people. Later on, during the gold rush, they were used as freight routes to move mail gold people, etc. The trail is impassable for almost all of the year. It gets put in the winter time when villagers travel between the other villages on snowmobile or dog. And then it breaks up in the springtime. So there's only a few months where you can actually travel on this. And right now it's routed to go through villages. It brings some economic prosperity to some of the villages in the region. And this is a musher from Minnesota. She's finished in Nome this year. So a little more about the human version. We follow almost exactly the Iditarod dog sled race route. They start in Willow down by Anchorage. We start a little bit away from Willow. And in the even years, which was this year, 2024, we follow the northern route is what they call it. And so we follow the red line. In odd years, it switches and it goes in the southern route, which hits the historic town of Iditarod, which is now a ghost town. And so a little bit more about the human race. Humans can bike, ski, or be on foot, but you have to pick one discipline before the race starts. There's a 1,000-mile and a 350-mile version, and you have to finish the 350-mile version at least once before you attempt the 1,000. There's time limits, so there's 30 days for the 1,000-mile and 10 days for the 350. And I finished the 350-mile race both in 2020 and 2022. And the 350-mile race ends in McGrath, which is where the orange arrow is. It's there in the middle, in the interior of Alaska. So this race is also near and dear to me because it is also on the route of what I think is the greatest public health story of all time. So if you've heard of the 1925 serum run, there was an outbreak of diphtheria in Nome, and the doctor there needed serum. He didn't have any that was up to date, but there was a stockpile in Seward. So it went by train from Seward down in the right-hand corner up to Nenana. And from Nenana all the way to Nome, it traveled in a series of by dog sleds. So there were 20 mushers involved and around 160 dogs. And they took this serum, it was January, it was like -50, -60 degrees. There's mushers endured frostbite. It was just this really harrowing situation, and they moved this serum in just over 5 days, which was an incredible time at the time. And jumping ahead a little bit, when we stayed in Galena, which is where the orange arrow is, we stayed at the house of the son-in-law of one of the mushers. So this guy, Edgar Noller, was a musher out of Galena. And he actually was the longest living musher from the serum run. And he lived into his 90s and was this great man of health. And you can see he's cutting lumber and he's a very old man. But he never drank or smoked in his life. And the health clinic in Galena is actually named after him. So it was pretty cool. They had this picture on the wall and they told me all about this guy. So really neat. Oh, and then I should say, so on our route, when we take the northern route, so once we hit the Yukon River in Ruby, I am pretty much following the same route that they did all the way to Nome. And so spoiler alert, we finished. So that's myself and my partner Jeff at the start and finish, and for more or less, we were together the whole entire time, and we are still together. So just briefly, a lot of you guys followed our trackers online, so I'm just gonna orient you. When you see the circles on the map, those are checkpoints for us. And in the beginning of the race, they're either row houses, cabins, or canvas tents. It really varies. And if you can see the red triangle, those are safety cabins, and there'll be more of those that pop up like later in the race. But getting to McGrath is like never assumed. It's actually like very difficult to get there. And this year was like no exception. So it was really hard to get to McGrath, and coming in there, I was like, I don't know if I can do like another 700 miles of this. This is really hard. But we had a lot of snow before the race started, so you can kind of see it piled up there on the right. And later on, we had cold temps, about 2 weeks of cold temps with no let up. And when I say cold temps, I mean nights of -40. And so it really weared on all the racers. And then we started getting high winds, like really high winds around day 3 that resulted in just a big snow drifts and very slow movement for all the humans. I saw one moose right here, and I was right by a cabin, so I felt extremely safe, and he's on a trail a ways away from me. But this is an area where the moose are known to be aggressive, and it's the same area where the musher ended up having an encounter with a moose and killing it. And if you don't know that story, you should just look it up. But this was as close as I got, and I'm very happy for that. When it's nice, we have great views. So this is around 80 miles as the crow flies. And you can't see Denali, it's back there, but there were some clouds. But I have a nice picture of Foraker, which is the third highest mountain in the US. And then kind of like the nice weather ended and we got these really high winds. So in the upper left, you can kind of see, so that's what I looked like most of the race, just goggles, face covered, Jeff and I, you can see the trail behind us is blown in. And then we're always looking at like the peaks and you can see the snow just flying off those peaks. And that's like not a good sign. That means like really high winds. So you're just traveling miles towards the Alaska range, just dreading what's kind of what's going on there. In the upper right is what they call the musher's cabin. So this is an example of a cabin that we could stay in. This one has about 20 bunks in it, which is a lot. It's much bigger than a lot of the other ones, but it's painted really cool. And it's that Rainy Pass Lodge, which is just before you go up and over the pass here. And let's see, I do have some video and I think this sound will play and it's just like this work. And so that's me walking towards Jeff and this is like, and then we put our phone. And we don't take pictures unless it's good weather and warm weather. And so that's all we have for the whole of Rainy Pass. Yeah. And then in the lower left corner, that's on the backside of Rainy Pass. There's a lot less snow. It's actually in a rain shadow, but it's beautiful. It's really nice. So this is my graph for the 350-mile race ends, and this is a typical scene. So the moose is outside the window. People are eating breakfast. Moose is checking out the bikes. And the thermometer is at 40 below. Very like typical McGrath interior Alaska weather. So I'm jumping way ahead because and we're gonna go through the interior of Alaska. So McGrath up to Ruby, which is where the Yukon starts. This section is nothing but ghost towns, and there's not buildings in most of them. But the good news is that the dogs pass us in this section, and so you're not totally alone out there. And so overnight we stayed in Ophir, and then there's 2 safety cabins. And Cripple exists for the dog race. There's nothing else there, but we had a 10-pound food drop there, which was like super important that we get that food there. And that food has to be flown in by airplane because there's no other way to get it there. And then we slept overnight between Cripple and Ruby. And it was one of the most Alaskan experiences. I'll just tell this story because I got like 2 great stories. It was really cold, but at that point we're pretty used to it, and we knew we had to sleep. And when they put in the Iditarod Trail, so there's 5 snowmobiles that like create this trail. They're big, powerful snowmobiles, and they'll do like little semicircles off to the sides. And those are areas where the dog teams pull in and they can stop and rest, and they put down straw for the dogs to lay on, and they'll cook meals and stuff like that for the dogs. But everybody's camping out in this interior section because there's really no good places to stop. So we pulled into one of those, and this musher came up, and I think it was actually Anna Hennessy. And she's like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, are we like taking your spot? I didn't know that etiquette. Like, this musher's gonna get mad and kick us out. But I was really hoping she would be like, oh, you should let's all camp here together, and like, here's some straw, and here's like a dog that you can Oh, but she was too nice. She's like, oh no, we'll just go camp up a little further. Which I was like, okay, fine. But we're camped out and we're just off the trail, and we're getting in our sleeping bags, and we stayed warm during the night, but you would hear this little like jingle jingle and like this whoosh and like this pitter patter, and it was like these dog teams going by us like throughout the night. They're just silent except for this little jingle, and the northern lights were out overhead, and it was just like this like Alaskan experience that was like really cool. I loved the dogs passing us. It was so cool to see. And so you have to endure a couple dog videos. So I've got them in slow motion here, and so then I can count them. This is a full 16 dog team that's passing me here. And my favorite dog just looks like trouble, that one. And this musher is really cool. I sent him the video of this later. And as a side story, his daughter is an up and coming junior Iditarod racer. She's like winning all these races, and so she'll be competing in the Iditarod soon. So very cool connection there. I've got one more, and you can hear. Oh wait, hold on. So if you listen closely, you can hear the jingle of the dogs as they come by. And this is Pete Kaiser coming here. Yeah, I'll just let it make.
Nice job.
Good luck.
Thanks.
And then we've got another team coming there. So you can, that's what we heard like during the night, just the little jingle. And so then the dogs just doing their thing through the race.
Yes, it was too late in the year for Santa Claus.
Yeah. Sometimes the mushers give us like fruit snacks and stuff. It makes our day, and it's really awesome. I mean, even like a high five is great, but so just a little side story. So there's little dog booties that like litter the trail the whole way through Alaska. And so I picked up a couple that matched the pokies that I have on my hands, and I put them in my sled, and I still haven't put on there. And every time I look back, I was like, oh, this is so cute, because it's like matching. We have little matching. Some other things you'll see in interior Alaska. So there's still trapping that goes on there. So there's these traps throughout the trail, and they kind of are like Blair Witch Project like, and I don't know, are kind of entertaining as you're going along. And then you'll see areas like this where we just call it overflow, but it's anytime like water has come up on top of what's ice. And this was an area that was totally frozen when I went over it. And we had actually like no problems with overflow. It's like definitely a benefit of having really cold weather. Other people had problems with this area. But these can be even hidden under snow and you may not see them, and are one of the more dangerous things because people can fall in really deep into these areas. So just some about the Yukon. So here we hit Ruby, which is around mile 500. We go 130 miles down the Yukon River. It's huge. It's over a mile wide in places. And there's often no break from the wind. So there's us getting on the Yukon in the upper left. Here's us taking a lunch break on the Yukon. It's one of the only places that was protected by the wind. So every single musher and every single racer looked like they stopped in this area and had lunch. But a lot of times it's just blown over because it can be pretty windy there. So there's the trail's blown in there and we're in snowshoes, but it's not very deep. It's just goes slow. But the Yukon has really beautiful sunrise and sunset pictures, and so we have some great pictures of that. And then it was still really cold when we were on the Yukon. It was manageable, but still cold. And then this year, so our race director has his private pilot's license too. So it was like day 14 of the race, and he packed up extra supplies from the end of the 350-mile. And he actually flew over us racers and dropped us little like goodie bags. They had messaged us that day, and they were like, "We're coming, like be ready." And one of the racers grabbed this great picture of him like flying over, and there's us with our goodie bags. So we got beef jerky sticks, like beef sticks, a whole package of Fig Newtons, and some fruit snacks, and then little bottles of Fireball and we were just like overjoyed. It's like made our day. You can see our faces. So this is a really, like historic trade route. It was really interesting. So Caltech is where the, like villages are on the Yukon where that starts. And Unalakleet is on the coast. So this is a like historic trade route where Native Alaskans would bring things, like it was a big trading route. So from the coast to the interior. And it's this beautiful pass. It's like 70 some miles. It was really pretty. And this was like some of the oldest parts of the race. And then the other reason I'm bringing this up is up until now in the interior of Alaska, all the villages have been Athabascan communities. So they're traditionally, were traditionally nomadic, but, hunter-gatherer, and then they do a lot of like hunting for moose and fishing on the river. And then when you get to the coast and onwards, all the villages are Inuit villages, and they are like seafaring people. So walrus, seal, whale, and like fish from the sea are their main sources of sustenance. So it was not big, but there were some cultural differences between the interior communities. And then like when you get to the coast, and we stayed in schools from like this area on. And so the schools in these little villages are where everybody goes, and it also houses a lot of cultural items. So you walk in and there's always some big like kayak type of thing hanging up, and murals of the way of life and things that they hunt. There's one with some like stuffed wolverines like smiling at you. It's just very really interesting places and cool to be able to experience. When we got to the coast, there's this place we stay at, Peace on Earth Pizza, and it is like the best in the entire world. So we got in at like 1:30 in the morning, and the owner was like, "I'll make you breakfast." So we're drinking coffee, having like the best iceberg lettuce salad in the whole world, and eating a bunch of pizza. And Unalakleet is like the biggest village that we passed through on the way to Nome. So I think it's around 700, maybe 800 people, and it has a pizza place. So it's like amazing. And then you start going up the coast, and the coast is this really unique area. You can see some pictures we have of the island out in the ocean, and it was just so exciting to get to the coast. And then it's not flat, so like those hills that you see in front of us, we end up climbing those, and there's some pretty significant climbs on the coast. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about what's my other great story is. So we get up to Shaktoolik, and then we cross over a bit of land, and then there's a safety cabin there called Little Mountain Cabin, and then you can see the red line goes like across the ocean up to Koyuk. And it doesn't look like much on the map, but it's actually a 30-mile sea ice crossing, and it can be extremely harrowing and high winds, and it had been like terrible weather for everybody until like we got there, and we had like the best weather crossing it. So my picture in the lower left is from the crossing, and I have a video. You'll have to like this is the I'll just let it play. You can hear me.
People have been saying that it's been windy, but I don't know, 10 miles in to the Norton Sound, I don't know, it's all clear. I mean, on the trail there's like these, fun bumps every 50 feet or so, and looks like Leah and Ryan with their bikes had a lot of fun with those. And we're following footprints of, we can see Gavin still a little bit, and then we've got Bayat and Christoph in front of us, and Jan the skier, and we're going down the trail here, right ahead of us. Well, not right ahead of us. Ahead of us 20 miles is Koyuk. When it's darker, you can see a light, and we're heading straight across for it. More bumps, pretty fun. And this is the rest of the sound. And We'll have Jeff wave. You're supposed to wave.
Yeah, he a lot of times can't hear me or says he can't hear me, so I'm just like, we had a lot of hand signals, but that gives you an idea of like, I mean, you can be many, many miles from land when you're crossing this, and you can't hear wind in that, which was, like I said, we had the best weather. It's still, I mean, it's like a little bit below zero, but it was a very nice day. So in contrast, I think this will work. So Sunny came across the bay a couple days after me. And this was that's what I do. But I didn't need to put my readers on once. This will. All right, so you can see how quickly like things changed. And then Russell was asking, how do you know the ice is safe? So there's some years the ice isn't super safe across the bay, and they put in the trail more towards land, and then sometimes you even go up the land. But this year the ice was good enough. We actually went straight across. Like I said, there was a light by the airport, or the airstrip in Koyak, and we like headed straight across for that. And then sometimes you take your chances, which is why I was really glad I was done with this section before that happened when I was out there.
So someone goes out and tests the ice or?
So when they put in the dock sled race, they have a bunch of different ice readings and they know like where to put it in. So sometimes you can see the markers, like you can see the markers that they put up on the ice. And we're told, like when in doubt, I mean, try to stay right, like we follow the markers usually to the right. And that's like this usually the safest route. But when in doubt, try to do that. But sometimes, so there have been years where a storm has come in and broken up the sea ice, and the dog race is done. A couple years ago, they just like canceled it. People couldn't get across the sea ice anymore. And they're talking about if, you know, as the climate changes, this may become more common that these early spring storms come in and break up the sea ice. It's something that the dog race is well aware of. I have just a few, some pictures left. I kind of threw in everything here, because all of this is like a jumble of, we know this storm is coming in and we crossed the big part of the sea ice, but we still have some sea ice left to cross. And this big storm is like coming in off the ocean. It's bringing really warm, wet weather. And in the villages, you can get cell phone service on the Alaska network. And we're like getting these warnings of like, there's dangerous conditions on the sea, test the sea ice before you go out. And we're just like, I don't know, let's just go. Let's just go ahead of it. So you can kind of see with one of like the storm is coming in. We got some snow and some wind. So we kind of just went from school in Koyak down to Elam, over to Golovin, up to White Mountain, like as quickly as we could while still getting some good rest at Elam. So when we're out in interior Alaska, sometimes you'll still see things from World War II and the Cold War that like the US military put up and like monitoring Russia. So this is an old radar base right by Elam, and it's no longer being used by the US. It's been turned over to tribal land. But it is like the weirdest thing to see when you haven't like seen anything forever. And then the trail went out so that we got snow and wind. But there was either a coyote or like a young wolf that just followed the Iditarod Trail right up. We just like followed his tracks for like 15 miles. So it was really funny because we couldn't see it sometimes because like the stakes were starting to get blown over. And we're just like, oh, we'll just follow this animal. I'm sure it's coming. And then in Elam, we got a big kick out of, so this is the Inuit word for I am walking. And so we stood there a long time and tried to like pronounce this. Is how I'm gonna pronounce it. But it made us laugh a lot. To learn this word. And then we're like, did they put that in the hallway like just for us so we can like learn this word? But it's funny. So then the big storm is coming in. So this is a safety cabin that gets this big drift in front of it, and people leave the shovel outside. And if you want to get in, you shovel your way in. So that's Jeff, where he shoveled it in enough where we could. We just went in, we ate dinner, and then continued on. In the upper right, you can see like everything's just starting to have that flat light, and you can barely see anything. We're in snowshoes, things are getting really awful, terrible. And then in the bottom right, so this is actually when we're coming down into Golovin, and Jeff is like, as you can see, trail markers, and Jeff's the little thing out there, and then we have like this green stuff that's starting to show up, and that's like water being pushed up through the sea ice. So that is when, and this is like coming into evening, and that's when we were like, we're just gonna get across like Golovin Bay and get off like the ice as soon as possible, because we could see that starting to happen. I'll show this video. It's just like another stormy video. It's like stormy that's and it was like a rain snow mix, and so we just got soaked. So here's me in my really cool get up with my snowshoes on. I put my poncho under my jacket because my jacket was like not waterproof anymore, and full goggles and everything. And I'm in front of the last safety cabin before you get to Nome. So it's 43 miles to Nome. And we had gone through this storm, and then it was still happening when we got to this cabin, but we knew it was going to be letting up, and then the temps were dropping. And so what we didn't want was like wet and cold temps. But the timing on this worked out great, because we slept, we ate. So we always get into the cabin. Oh, I should bring this up. So when you arrive at the cabin, it's not just resting. So sometimes you have to go gather wood, and if there's not wood there, gather wood, start the fire, get the cabin warm, melt snow for water, so that sometimes can take a long time. Make a meal, sleep, wake up, get all your water and stuff ready to go again. And then you try to be a good steward and go leave wood for the next person, or bring it inside to dry out. And so by the time we do all those things, and then we slept and we woke up, the storm was just ending. So it was like perfect timing. And then, yeah.
What hours were darkness on the left one?
Yeah, so it really changed throughout the race. So Alaska, at that time, they're getting like 7 more hours of daylight per day. And so I think by the time we ended the race, it was like 3.5 more hours of daylight than when we started. And then there was a time change in there, and we're getting close to Nome. So I would say at the last cabin, it started getting light around 7, and it was starting to get, or it was like the sun went down around 10:30. Yeah. They're already in Nome, they're at midnight sun right now. Like they just started. I saw someone post the other day, but they're on the western, edge of Alaska, the western time. So anyway, we start off from this cabin, and there's no trail left, and we're in snowshoes, and then one snowmobile came by us, like, I mean, just like an angel. And he put in one track all the way to Nome, and we followed that one track, and what it allowed us to do was get out of our snowshoes. When at first we were going about the same speed because it's pretty soft. And then later on when the sun went down, like the temps kind of dropped some and the trail hardened up and we got a little bit faster. And like it was so perfect that he came through. So snowmobiles can really help you if they're traveling between villages, which this one was. And this is our last night, so we had nearly a full moon and then northern lights were out. And so during the night, we didn't even turn on our headlamps because we just had the one track to follow, and it was like pretty much this bright the whole time. And in the bottom right, you can see the lights of Nome like 16 miles away. And so there's the full moon kind of starting to set, the lights of Nome. Jeff is walking on the crest of the snow because he could, and it makes him feel really light and awesome. And so he's walking along, and then we walked towards those lights for 5 hours, and that's like the terrible part. You can see the lights of Nome, and you still have 5 hours to go. And then on the bottom of it, we're coming into Nome, and then there's my finish picture. Under the Burled Arch. And fun fact, so earlier this week, the Burled Arch collapsed. I think it's over 20 years old, like this one is, and just the sea salt air and everything, the wood just deteriorated and collapsed. So now they need to make a new one. And it was a beautiful day when we finished in Nome. And then the next day it started like snowing and blowing again, and we're just like, oh, thank goodness, like we're not out there anymore. And we have, those are our smiles when the next day after we're done with the race. We're very happy. So some stats, like, so for the 1,000 mile, I mean, usually if you're doing the 1,000, like, you know what you're doing and you're really determined to get there. So we had 61% finish, which was really good. And the 350 mile had 65% finish, so it was almost the same. So Jeff and I are the 28th and 29th people who have ever finished it the 1,000 mile on foot. And then, as Rachel said, I was the third woman ever and the first one in the last 10 years that finished. And then really notable this year, no skiers had ever finished in 30 days. There's been quite a few attempts. And this year, 5 skiers finished, including a female, Sunny, she was the last one. So just a really like cool year, and yeah, fun to be a part of. So that is the end of my picture. So now questions.
Okay, question time.
Thank you. How did you manage to sweat? Because you're working, you're sweating, but it's also negative 40 degrees and you're wearing a parka.
Yeah, great question. So can be really problematic. So over the years, I've just kind of got my clothing set up. And so I need to keep my like lower half warm, and then my upper half, I'm like my shell jacket, I'll often like just slip out of, and then I've got like a more breathable jacket on underneath. And I can actually like I'll be like that until like 0 degrees sometimes, because like you said, I'm pulling a sled and I'm like working pretty hard and I'm staying comfortable. And then every once in a while I need to like put on a bigger jacket. I also wear an inner layer, so I don't wear wool layers. They don't work well for me. Some people love them, some people don't. I wear like synthetic layers that dry really quickly. So think of just like more of like your summer type of things that wick sweat and dry quickly. Because inevitably, like I sweat a little bit, and I like to just dry fast. If I stay wet, I get pretty cold.
Thanks for sharing this amazing experience. I love that you shared the sights and the sounds and the feelings. Could you share the smells? Were there smells of it?
So, I mean, so much of this is like, there's nothing, you know, there's no sounds, there's no plants. So when you do like, go by like a tree that's recently fell down and, you know, all the, like the evergreen, the Christmas tree smell, it's just like, oh, you know, like an attack on your senses. And then you can smell, I mean, like the dogs and there's often like, they're cooking for the dogs and like stuff like that. So when we're around the dogs, there's that, my fur ruff like that I had around, just smells like cabin smoke. So it's kind of a nice smell. I was like happy when I took it out and I was like, okay, this doesn't smell too bad. I can bring it in and so really cool. And I'm trying to think of anything else unique. I think it was mostly like if we ever got you know, like the smell of the vegetation, was really interesting. Otherwise, it's just like that cold winter kind of nothingness. Yeah.
I just wonder mentally how you keep it together, because when I see the route, a lot of it is, you know, looks fairly flat, beautiful, but very desolate, nothing to distract you. And I just wonder mentally, and to me, it doesn't seem like you're having conversations with a partner, you know what I mean? You're in single file, and I just wonder how mentally you keep it together.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's hard to have a conversation with anyone. When we had a skier that was with us a lot, and so whenever he passed us, we'd stop and it's a nice interaction with the day. But otherwise, sometimes like when Jeff and I are talking to each other, like I said, he either can't hear me or is pretending he can't. So we have a lot of hand signals actually. And then so mentally, so I listened to 22 audiobooks. And I started a few and didn't finish, and then I listened to a lot of music. The other thing is that, like for me, mentally, my toughest moments were kind of getting to McGrath, because I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is really hard. How am I gonna do this for more days and more days? And then in the middle, I had hard moments as well. For me, once I was able to get a few hours of sleep and eat, like my mood just like totally followed sleep, and if I could keep my calories up. So around mile 500, I finally figured that out. Or you're out there and you're like more in control of like getting sleep at some places. And it was never a lot of sleep, but even like, you know, 4 hours was just like reinvigorating. So for me, once I hit the Yukon, I started like really kind of getting in a group. So I was like, okay, 50 miles to the next place, 45 miles to the next place, 35 miles to the next place. And it was just like, this is my day. Sometimes it takes 20 hours, sometimes it takes 14 hours, and I'm just gonna start checking these off. And I was actually feeling really, really good. And then once I got to the coast, I started thinking, okay, this is doable. But I really just did take it like one day at a time for almost like all of the race. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so how did you recharge yourself? I mean, your devices, not yourself.
Oh, yeah. Practical things. So I have a battery pack. And then that'll like charge stuff for a couple days. So once we got, especially to like we're at schools, we sleep in the gym. And later on, so they were on spring break for the 1 week, and then they came back, and then we were in the last two schools, Quaker and Elon put us in the home ec room, which was awesome because it's like there's hot water and a microwave, and it's just like we can eat warm things. And that's like all we needed. But yeah, with the device, and if it got down to it, so I was running my headlamp on batteries, and we just had a bunch of batteries, yeah. And then I haven't talked much about what we ate and supplies, because I just figured someone will ask about it.
What did you eat?
So I think I've got, so the beginning of the race, there's a few roadhouses we can stop at and grab a meal. And then the race allows us 2 5-pound bags for the beginning of the race that they fly at the checkpoints. And then we got the 1 10-pound bag, in Cripple. But from after that, you're kind of on your own. So these were my boxes that I mailed to the villages from Ruby onwards. And that is just some of the foods. You can see a lot of candy and junk food. It's like anything that stays edible frozen. And then in the back, there's dehydrated meals, like 2 bins of them. So I would pack usually, like have 2 of those a day, and then just like a bunch of snacks throughout. So like I said, a lot of stuff that stays edible frozen or that you can heat up with like body heat. So, peanut butter does really well. So there's a lot of peanut butter based, high calorie type of things. But yeah, you can pick out your favorite snack food from our bins there.
You can live on Swedish fish alone.
Yeah. And then, the racers who have dropped from the race, you get to raid their like. And then people start leaving stuff behind because they're like, I am so sick of like these Snickers bars. And I was just like overjoyed to find like something other than what I packed, like something different. And like some of the Europeans pack like much different, much fancier, like meats and cheeses that, it's still good and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's kind of fun. I think.
The food sounds like what we do on, 2-week backpack trips.
Yeah.
You find things and, some very simple questions. Did you have battery, powered clothing? Heated socks, anything?
No.
And your feet stayed warm?
Yeah.
How'd you do that?
I wear 2 pairs of socks a lot of the time, and then we're moving on our feet. Bikers have a lot harder time keeping their feet warm when they're on the bike. So sometimes they get off and walk just to warm up their feet. But as long as I'm moving on pretty good, and then I had 2 pairs of shoes with me, which for me worked out really well. And one of my pairs was warmer than the other. And the other one I liked better for climbing hills. But my feet were just kind of like when they were sick of one pair, I kind of switched to the other. But it was like a little strategic as well. Yeah.
And maybe this isn't fair, but did you cry?
There was like a couple like slap moments, not like super like tears, just like, oh, I'm so tired and can't wait to be done. There's a racer, Gavin, he won the foot race and he's like a very like, wears his heart on his sleeve. He's from Ireland type of guy. He's actually super interesting. He's an underwater welder, but it's wild. He goes and lives under the ocean for like 28 days at a time. Anyway, he was like posting that he like cried every day. and he was like 2 days faster than me in the end. And I was like, well, I was slower, but I didn't cry every day. Yeah, maybe I did something right.
How many calories do you estimate you burned a day
Burned,
or ate?
so I didn't count calories, but I think I was probably taking in like 5,000 a day, but I lost 15 pounds.
Wow.
Jeff did too. If people bigger than us, Jeff and I are like the same size pretty much, but people bigger than us, this one guy on foot said he lost a pound a day when he was out there. But I felt like we did really good about taking in calories, when we could. There was a few people, well, like one person in particular who didn't do a good job at taking care of himself, and you could just see like the difference in energy levels when you're out there. But the human body can only process so much per day. And actually the dogs can process a lot more calories than us humans can. But yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what's in your pack? So we heard about the food, we heard about the extra pair of shoes.
Yeah.
We heard about some of the stuff that you wore, but what else was in your pack?
Yeah, so I didn't load it up, but so I have like a minus 20-degree sleeping bag, a bivy sack, which is like a big cover for the sleeping bag that is kind of like waterproof and helps keep you warm. And like another quilt that I would wear sometimes and a couple sleeping pad options. Well, I have one underneath the sled and then one in there. So that's all in the middle of my sled, all my sleeping stuff's in the middle. And then whenever the opportunity comes up to ride our sleds and sled down the hill, we do it. And so that's kind of strategic, so I can just sit on that stuff. And then the back of my sled, you can tell how I organize my stuff. So the back of my sled has like my pot for cooking, stove, foot care things, extra pairs of shoes, a gear kit. I needed to repair a few things out there. And then I had a lot of foot care stuff with me because I've had bad issues in the past. I have really great feet the whole time. What else is in that bag? Like my goggles, so I know like where everything is, like when the weather turns bad. And then up front, I've got my food and more water. So I wear a hydration pack that can carry 2 liters of water. And it's also just strategic for putting stuff in there. Like I've got an inhaler that I need to keep warm. And like the battery pack for my headlamp, different things like that are in my pack. And then in my sled, I carried 2 more liters of water at sometimes, because we didn't like to stop and melt snow during the day if we didn't have to. It takes a lot of time. So I had one jug that was like really concentrated electrolytes, which worked really well for me. And the other one was usually coffee, like a coffee hot chocolate mix. Anything you can throw in extra for calories. So it's like more hot chocolate packets and like anything you can. So that is a lot of my sled, and then extra jackets. And I had a few extra clothes, like kind of like just in case things, like if you fall in the water and you need to get warm. So just a few extra things. So I am like a medium packer, and my sled fully loaded is like 55 pounds. And there's people who go lightweight, and I am not that person. And I would never probably be that person. And then there's a guy who's done this 8 times, Bayat, it's spelled beat, but his name is Bayat. And he's out there, he was, I was seeing him a lot at cabins until the very end. And he always says, I've never regretted bringing something, but I have regretted like not having enough. So his sled weighs 65 pounds. And he has to carry a little more food than I do, but he's also done this 8 times, so he has seen it all. So he's like, oh, this one time, like my box didn't make it. And like, that's a real possibility. This year, all our boxes made it to villages, and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's mainly what's in my sled. Somehow it all adds up to that much, yeah.
Having accomplished such a feat, what do you do next? Or like, have you thought about doing it again or not? Or
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So when I first got back, I was like, no, I'm not doing this. It's so much prep work, and it costs a lot of money, and you need to take, a month off or 5 weeks off. And then, so I started thinking, if I do this again, I think I want to do the southern route. So we're in the middle where it changes. So I'm not signed up for next year. So it would be 2027 if I do it again. And no female has actually done the southern route on foot ever. So if that happened, the southern route's a little bit longer and it's hillier, and it can have less snow because of like the terrain.
So I remember talking to you, Faye, about after the first time you did the 350, and you were like, it was so hard, and I've never been in a place that was trying to kill me so bad. It was just awful, and I was like, oh God, I'm never doing anything like this again. And I was like, well, wait, you did it in 2022. What happened? And you were like, well, they gave me a free registration.
Yeah, that can be motivation.
I just have a couple questions.
So like, if something like bad were to happen, like if you got attacked by a moose and you were alone, like what would happen? Like, how would you communicate? Yeah, so that's the thing about this race is, so like the ones here, like in Minnesota or Wisconsin, like, there are snowmobiles that can come by and pick you up. And in Alaska, that is like, the race director is not going to save you. That's what I said, like, I wouldn't count on it. So during the first 350, he is somewhere along there. And there's another volunteer who is usually up by the mountains. And if something disastrous were to happen, so I have a satellite device that I can send messages and someone can come in there. Once you get past McGrath, you have to rely on relaying messages to a villager, to come and get you. And by Nome, there's like an active search and rescue group, because that area is really dangerous and they do get activated, but it relies on me sending a satellite message, like if I can. So, it's really remote, and every once in a while, think about how far you are from, like when we're in the interior, and you can be like, 75 miles from your nearest village. It's kind of intimidating. And then for the people that dropped out of the race, were they like airlifted out, or how? Yeah, so they flew back from wherever they were. I mean, if they dropped really early, maybe they got a snowmobile ride. So none of these villages have roads between them. So in the winter time, if you're gonna travel, it's by like bush plane comes and gets you, or snowmobile. And then in the summer, it's plane, boat, or ATV. So yeah, the people who dropped, you're supposed to get yourself to a checkpoint. And this year, I think, everybody did like a good job of that. We had last year, there's a girl from Minnesota. She was made an example of, so her bike just fell apart. And there's this picture of her, she strapped it so the wheels wouldn't even turn. She strapped it to her back and carried it for 15 miles to the checkpoint. And so there's this, they're like, yes, this is what we want you to do. And it's like, this 60-pound bike.
So, we are at the top of the hour. It's 11 o'clock. I want to say thank you so much, Faye, for sharing all of this with us. I think there's a meeting that's going to start getting set up in here in about 15 or 20 minutes. So if anyone wants to stick around a little bit more, you can. And I know they have some show and tell items up front. But thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week.